let's look at some very disturbing drone footage that's been widely shared around the world. This is almost certainly over northern China, over Xinjiang. Can you tell us what is happening here?
I cannot see, this video. This is not the first time you show me. I still remember last year you showed me what is happening in Xinjiang.
In Xinjiang, exactly.
But let me tell you this. Xinjiang, have you been to Xinjiang yourself?
No, I never have.
You know, Xinjiang is regarded as the most beautiful place in Xinjiang. There's a Chinese saying, you do not know how big China is.
Ambassador, that is not beautiful coverage, however, is it?
You know, Xinjiang, that is exactly what I'm going to tell you. Since 1990, Xinjiang has completely changed because there's thousands of terrorist attacks. People cannot...
That was 10 years ago. Can I ask you why people are kneeling, blindfolded and shaven and being led to trains in modern China? What is going on there?
I do not know where you get this videotape. You know, sometimes you have a transfer of prisons and prisoners, you know, in any country.
Basically, they don't care if they get caught. But this monologue isn't just about China. It's about the global financial institutions that couldn't care less about what the Chinese have been doing, caught on tape, and how Chinese influence corrupts the very top of our democracy. Literally around the same time the Chinese ambassador to the UK was sitting for that interview, a stunning report came out from the New York Times that some of the companies manufacturing face masks, including some of which have been shipped here to the United States, have been caught essentially using Uyghur slave labor in a program which is basically a more sanitized version of the concentration camp labor leased out by the Nazi regime during the World War II. What was really telling to me was the response to this report, to that interview, both bombshells in their own right. Not a scrap of coverage in the mainstream news. Nothing from Republicans, save for one, Senator Hawley. Nothing from Democrats. Nothing from the White House. Why? Because people are making far too much money looking the other way. The use of Uyghur slave labor to manufacture face masks for the American public is the logical conclusion of the bipartisan China policy pushed by Washington for decades. We have no capability to protect ourselves, to produce the equipment necessary to keep our populace safe, to keep our populace employed in stable enterprise, and have to rely on imprisoned foreign slaves to make things for us so that we can have extra income to spend on drugs and video games or other cheap products which don't even make us happy. In reaction to this story, I noted a chapter from friend of the show Matthew Stoller's book, Goliath, in which he details how industrial monopolies here in the United States during World War II actively tried to work with the Nazi regime because it was a guarantee of cheaper prices and higher profits at the time. Sound familiar? These people haven't changed in the interim 75 years. Instead, what has changed is a government willing to do something about it, which is what brings us to today, where Donald Trump is president of the United States, who more than any candidate before him highlighted the bipartisan corruption in Washington surrounding our economic relationship with China and the lies that we've been fed for decades. And while I believe his tariff policy has done to rebalance more than anything, than any trading relationship in modern history before him, it is simply not enough at this critical time. And as I've highlighted here before, right now, at this moment, Donald Trump has an executive order on his desk, crafted by Peter Navarro, which would incentivize the domestic manufacture of personal protective equipment and encourage U.S. firms to move their industrial operations outside of China back to the U.S. Doesn't even force them to do so, which is something I'm in favor of. And guess what? It's still sitting on the desk, unsigned after months. Why? Because Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin and White House advisor Jared Kushner believe the corporate concerns of alleged fear of Chinese retaliation. The political moment that was rife for fundamentally resetting our relationship with China, the country which lied about coronavirus and covered it up back in January, has been completely squandered. And the reason is the very reason that we've been sold out to China in the first place. The Trump White House is too worried, according to my sources, of upsetting corporate America with this move and does not want to act much more aggressively against China because, you guessed it, it would impact the stock market, and it would impact, in their view, public opinion about how the economy is going right now. There has never been a more opportune time to completely decouple from China. And instead, we are getting irrelevant culture fights, obstinance, and obfuscations about the coronavirus itself. It was one of the central promises of the Trump presidency. And while he has done a lot, he has not followed through in the ways that he should have.
That clip you played is just
horrible.
Unbelievable. Right. And the fact that we don't have more journalists doing that type of coverage or talking about this here is a crying shame. But look, this is really what our whole society has been structured around, maximizing shareholder value.
Yes.
I mean, that is ultimately like the Trump card. That trumps every other thing that we might want to do in this country, even though the American people didn't buy into that. They don't buy into that. They understand the value of being able to make things here, being able to, when we have a pandemic, have critical supply lines here so that you can have
Yes.
the PPE or the medicine or the medical supplies that you need here at home, not to mention the jobs that would come with that. So, so that's why, yeah, it's a no-brainer. There are other values that create a healthier society. So at the same time that we've had GDP growth and we've had, unemployment low and we've had the stock market high, we've also had these massive deaths of despair. We've also had the hollowing out of most of America. I mean, if you go to most towns, most small towns and rural areas across the country, you see a vacuuming out of the human capital, of the industrial capital, of the life of the community in much of the country. And, people here seemed totally disconnected from that. And you're right. That was a core part of what Donald Trump touched on. That was a core part of what got him elected. And he seems to not see it at all anymore.
No. And, literally, 7:33 a.m., he just tweeted this: strong stock market numbers. You want to see them dive? Vote for the radical left with their big tax hikes. It's like, that is not what anybody is voting on right now. This is the administration, this is the president that came to office and broke the mold on China, probably forever, even economically. Like I said, I want to give him credit. I still think he has done more than any president in modern history in order to reset our relationship with China. And yet, in this moment where I think it really mattered, I think it matters now more than it even mattered a couple of years ago with the tariffs, because the political will was there in order to really do something.
Yeah.
And you can see, the Chinese are bold-faced liars. And not even that, they almost don't even care. You saw the indifference of that guy. He's like, prisoners, they get transferred in any country. That's how they feel. They'll have their crimes broadcast to the world, and they could care less because they know they have everybody. All the business leaders. Even Mark Cuban. And look, I like Mark Cuban. But yesterday, he was challenged, I think, by Ted Cruz. He was like, can you even say free Hong Kong? And he said, I don't comment on the domestic politics of any country. This is a cop-out, right? All of these business guys, they're like, I don't comment on domestic politics. That's a load of BS because they're afraid. They don't want to get the Mavericks banned. But it's pretty disgusting to watch somebody who's worth billions of dollars and has a lot of financial risk on the line. Like I said, I wanted to draw attention to Holly. He's putting out a bill, I think this week in the Senate, which would ban ban companies from doing business with those who have forced slave labor, and is challenging the NBA and Nike and others who do business in China and actually contract with some of these companies in order to go away from it. It's not going to happen.
Right. Well, and by the way, we should also ban prison labor here as well. Something that we've covered too. So let's not cover up our own sins here. But down in Louisiana, New Orleans, they the sanitation workers were on strike and they replaced them with prison. It was absolutely insane. So let's be clear about our own sins here as well. But the bottom line here is you're absolutely right. To the extent that, that Trump got into office on rebuilding America, on bringing back jobs from overseas, and people really believed that he could create a more hopeful future in their communities. And look, I was out on a limb as a Democrat. I supported the tariffs. I supported a different approach to China, as some of us on the left did. But ultimately, it really hasn't amounted to much. And so now when the chips are down, when you actually have a chance, when you have such a clear-cut case, the American people are totally with you. They totally see the need for this, and it's demonstrated so clearly that that's when you back down because you're afraid of the freaking stock market. Give me a break. It's pretty pathetic.
That is absolutely pathetic.